We are finally here with Aliens vs. Avengers, the finality of this series. Oh my God, it took long enough, right? So, what this does is this picks up at Bar Sinister with all these basically xenomorphs emerging out of the Sinisters themselves. Now, in case you forgot everything that happened, I don't blame you if you did, here's a quick kind of review of what's taken place so far. If you guys remember David the android from Prometheus and Alien Covenant, he and other androids like him existed in an alternate reality here in this story, that they had unleashed the xenomorphs across the universe and basically destroyed all life in the universe. Then they discovered the multiverse, and so they unleashed the xenomorphs in this universe where this story is taking place. Now, some of the engineers that were destroyed by the David androids survived, and so those engineers were following suit. We'll follow up with their story here in a minute. But of course, as you would expect, things hit the fan on Earth like that. Because xenomorphs procreate so incredibly quickly, by the time any of the superheroes on Earth realized what was going on, it was too late. They had to just construct evacuation vessels as fast as they possibly could. Mutants took off to Mars, right? Basically the new Krakoa, as we know it from Hickman's run. And Wakanda has their own story to tell, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Most everybody else died. Pretty much every other superhero on Earth died. And so now, all you have is Bar Sinister on the remnants of what used to be Mars where the mutants resided, because Sinister had actually brought a xenomorph with him, and then in turn, after duplicating himself, he unleashed these xenomorphs across the world that either infected or killed every mutant that remained, and then he infected all these versions of himself, the hope being that he could create a kind of prime xenomorph, which is exactly what happens here, because as these xenomorphs start to emerge from Sinister, we end up seeing that for one of these Sinisters, a red xenomorph emerges. Now, this is actually Jonathan Hickman giving an amazing throwback to the Xenomorph comic book series. There was actually a civil war among the xenomorphs, the red xenomorphs versus the black xenomorphs. It's a pretty dope story, and we should probably cover it. Let me know if you want me to. But this red xenomorph, being so unique, is basically the alpha xenomorph, right? Kind of in place of a queen in the traditional sense. But there's a lot more to it than what originally appears to be going on here. And so in that moment, when the other Sinisters approach this red xenomorph and try to maintain some measure of control, right? Because one of the things to keep in mind is that Sinister, being such a nefarious guy, wants to use these xenomorphs to kind of carry out his campaign across all of creation for just sinister reasons, right? That this alpha xenomorph kills him and starts killing all the others. And so this is really the only one left. There can only be one ruler here, right? So one of the cool aspects of this is that traditionally in the xenomorph mythos, right? Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien versus Predator, yada, yada, yada. Xenomorphs only ever really copy the physical attributes of whatever organism they emerge from, right? The dog runner alien from Alien 3 is a perfect example of that. You don't really see any instance that I'm aware of, I could be wrong here, but you don't really see any instances where xenomorphs copy the personality traits of the individuals they emerge from. But this particular alpha has copied the personality traits of Mister Sinister. And so that's why it's kind of smiling while all the other xenomorphs destroy all the other Sinisters, so that these xenomorphs are the only real occupants of this world. And so what this does is it switches over to the story of Wakanda. Now, this is something that a lot of you guys wanted to know about, right? That when we picked up with the first 3 issues, Wakanda was just out in space. They were one of the very few groups that managed to escape Earth and survive. Well, Wakanda has what's called the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda. The gist behind this is that Wakanda, in achieving interstellar travel, had just gone out to the stars, fashioned its empire. Now, the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda was actually an aftermath to Secret Wars 2015 and the lead up to it, which is to say, if you guys remember the ending of Secret Wars 2015, Black Panther had the Infinity Gauntlet, but once he realized the end was nigh, he used the Time Stone and wound back to before the incursions and everything kicked off. And because Reed had done the other side of that equation, which was basically setting everything back to rights, Black Panther emerged in Wakanda before the changes had taken place that Reed had made, which basically meant he remembered everything that had happened, even if almost nobody else did. Well, one of the first things that he had done, because Wakanda was already working on interstellar travel, they completed the program and shot everything into space. And so Wakanda does exist on Earth, but it also exists out in space. The same thing happens here in this universe, right? So it's a really, really cool element of his character that Hickman is maintaining and keeping intact. But one of the things he does is he gives us this monologue. He says, no one expected Wakandans to settle on a fertile, unnamed arm of a spiral galaxy that kissed the edge of a dying nebula. No one imagined that their atemporal generation ships would spawn a sprawling galactic empire, and yet it did. T'Chaka's reach boasted a manufacturing ring world that was the beating heart of Wakandan expansion. Because keep in mind, in this Aliens versus Avengers universe, T'Chaka never died. So it was actually him that led the whole intergalactic empire of Wakanda instead of T'Challa. But continuing on here, right, it says, celestial farms spawned supernovas that produced all the necessary elements for imperial growth. Hydrogen, iron, palladium, vibranium, all super abundant and critical to Stargate construction and system expansion. There were corridors between worlds that eliminated the need for interstellar travel, providing the optimal conditions for Wakandan society to thrive across solar systems. Stargates were the linchpin of Wakandan life, and they were key to Wakanda's death. The Empire's interconnectedness meant that a single seed world could easily infect and spread the Xenomorph plague across the entirety of Wakandan space. One world became two. Two became four. Four brought on the fall of the Empire, and at its height, there were 57 worlds and countless outposts in the Wakandan space empire. It's a catastrophic collapse that happened in the blink of an eye, and it makes perfect sense. It's almost kind of like a zombie plague when you're infected with a xenomorph. All that has to happen is the wrong person gets let in. They're infected and no one knows. And when that happens, literally a xenomorph bursts out of their chest and the game is on. And again, because xenomorphs are incredibly sneaky, they're very, very stealthy, they can start snatching people up before anybody even realizes what's going on. And that's how it all collapses. Because it says, by the time Emperor T'Challa returned to his kingdom, only 2 worlds had not completely fallen to the infection. Of course, this happening after the death of his father. And on both of those, a dying war raged against the alien spawn. The Emperor had made his return. Blades were drawn. And what follows, guys, is one of the most crazy things that I've ever seen, because it says the good fight engaged and an unwinnable war began and ended, but not in a wave of Wayland parasites. Instead, the end of Wakanda was engineered. Because if you remember that bit that we were talking about earlier, right? Those surviving engineers who chased down the David androids to try to basically fix what it was the androids had done to eliminate the xenomorph parasite, they have this crazy strategy. Because what we're told here is that the engineers had been busy in this new universe cleansing it. Microscopic black holes that lasted for only picoseconds, just long enough to erase an infected world from existence. The godlike race of engineers had done godlike things, erasing worlds, entire cultures from this universe in an attempt to erase their first sin, life, from all of reality. T'Challa learned their truth at the end of his sword. And so these Wakandans, led by T'Challa, take down the engineer ship, and they literally kill seemingly what remains of these engineers. And it says, he learned their lesson, for they had taught well. Save what you can and burn the rest. And so T'Challa is basically forced to gather whoever he can, those who are survivors and are not infected, and they fled Wakandan space, right? It's nuts. It's crazy, man, right? It's absolutely crazy. It's phenomenal. And so at that point, you pick back up on basically Mars with what's left of the Earthbound survivors, right? You have Manifold, basically a teleporter. There's a lot more to him than that, but within the confines of this story, teleportation is really his main ability. You have Emma Frost, Wolverine, Carol Danvers, and Armor, right? And so when T'Challa sees Tony Stark, you get this really interesting exchange here, where he says, Tony, may you finally find peace. And Carol's just like, what about the Wakandan Empire? And the response of T'Challa it's fallen, right? The same fate as every other victim of this insanity. Creator and creation, driven to destroy each other, trapped in a mad dance that extends beyond one universe, and as it has no clear winner, could extend to all that there is, because discovering the multiverse means unlimited universes. It means as long as these David androids continue to live, and as long as there are any surviving engineers, if there even are any, they're literally going to play this cat and mouse game, where the David androids jump from one universe to the next, depositing xenomorphs, watching that universe just collapse in death and blood, and the engineers will follow suit, destroying what worlds where they can, and it'll just go on and on and on and on, until there's nothing left. Until the multiverse is just this gigantic dead husk. And so that's where the question is asked by Wolverine. Do you have any idea how to deal with something like that? And so in that moment, T'Challa almost offers a solution. But when that happens, he's interrupted by one of his own soldiers, because at this moment, this army of xenomorphs, hundreds of thousands strong, just come flying at everybody, right? It's literally a wave of death. And in that moment, it's just fire, right? And so Black Panther responds, right? He says, we're out in the open and there's a sea of them. We should be moving to the ship. We should nuke the entire site from orbit. Classic line. I love that line. I love that Jonathan Hickman put it in here, right? But Wolverine's like, look, man, I mean, these bones are getting old, but my eyes work just fine, right? Do you see that big red one? And that's when everybody kind of starts to realize they're being directed. And whether or not you're talking about the movie canon or you're talking about the comic book canon, the EU, if you want to call it that, there is always a case in that way, right? Xenomorphs controlled by queens, who are controlled by empresses, who are controlled by queen mothers. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. But the fact is, right, if they take out the alpha, the xenomorphs will be leaderless. And so in that moment, it's like, okay, let's launch an attack, because Wolverine says, can you cover us? We're going to take out the queen. Emma's diamond form is impervious to harm, and nothing can pierce armor's shields. And the question that T'Challa asked Wolverine, like, I mean, what are you going to do? And he's like, I'll find a way. Now, fortunately for Wolverine here, in this entire story, which you guys pointed out, he avoided a fate worse than death. How horrific would it be if the xenomorphs just had him strung up and literally just popping xenomorphs out of him constantly? His healing factor restores him. He's implanted with a new xenomorph. That thing pops out. He heals, implanted, it pops out over and over and over again, right? That would be horrific. And so Black Panther does what they can. They offer covering fire. He says, keep them at range, set up a killing field at 400 yards, cascading warheads and fire teams for any that get through. And he's like, Manifold, drop us right on top of Sinister, on top of that alpha xenomorph. Now, here's where things get crazy. Here's where it gets crazy, because in the middle of this whole fight, that Wolverine lands on top of the red xenomorph, and what does it do? It bamps out. It has Nightcrawler's powers. It teleports out. And I saw this and I was like, what? Son. A xenomorph with like mutant powers? Holy cow. Because once it teleports out, it just kind of goes up to a higher point. And it's almost sitting there, right? Kind of playing possum. Wolverine, of course, is temporarily damaged by the xenomorph's blood, but then he goes after this red thing. And then in turn, it teleports away. And that's when Wolverine realizes it was all a distraction, because while Wolverine is all the way up there, Armor is like, they can't hurt us, but there's too many of them. I am being overwhelmed. And Wolverine's like, just keep swinging. I'll get us clear if we need to. And that's when the Queen teleports into the shields of Armor, kills her on the spot. And that's when they start to realize, with this thing having powers, effectively the end is nigh. There's no way they can win here, right? Emma Frost is overtaken, and in turn, it turns its sights on everybody else. And T'Challa is just like, they failed, right? And we will not hold here for long. My son was right. We have to go, Carol. And the response of Carol Danvers, no, right? I should not have run the first time, and I'm not running anymore. Now, that's something to understand about Carol. She's carried this guilt with her the entire time, because keep in mind, when Carol and Tony and Miles and those guys originally left Earth, Captain America was playing defense, right? He told them, like, leave, get out of here. But it's simply the fact that they left survivors on Earth. They left people alive on Earth, and they knew they were going to die. And so Carol Danvers, being former military, right, a former member of the Air Force, a long-standing part of her history, always kind of believes in the idea of no man left behind. And so she feels like a failure. She feels like a complete and total failure for leaving her friends and even just innocent people to die. And so that's why she says, do what you can here for your people and for whoever else makes it, and cover your eyes. You rarely ever get them in Marvel Comics, right? Not since Kelly Sue DeConnick's run, but you get this really dope moment with Carol where T'Challa tells her, be careful. And she just says, careful is for those who plan on coming back. And she ignites her binary powers, right? Literally lets off energy almost equivalent to a star. Not enough to kill everybody. I mean, they're shielded, they have armor, that kind of thing, but it is enough to destroy the Xenomorphs. And that's where the question is asked, did it work? And it's kind of like, I mean, maybe. And in what's probably one of the most dope scenes that I think I've ever seen, this red Xenomorph, it just rises up out of these ashes, man. It's coming out of Crystal Lake like it's Jason. It's one of the coolest things that I've ever seen, right? It looks absolutely dope. And that's when they're like, oh my God, right? Because when it does, it emerges with the kind of protection you get from Colossus's osmium skin. So now it's got Colossus powers, right? And that's what makes this thing so interesting, is it has pretty much all these different powers of all these mutants. If Nimrod were a Xenomorph, this is what it would look like, son. It's phenomenal. And that's where T'Challa's just like, there's still too many of them left, and there's no stopping that thing. Have everybody fall back. We are leaving now. And so at that point, they start evacuation ships, and then suddenly the red one teleports behind them, and then you jump back. You jump back to the day before, to yesterday, the last stand of Iron Man, right? What does he say? Manifold's signature in the distance, I think Carol got away. We should probably follow her lead, Spider-Man. And literally Miles is like, you're not gonna hear me complaining, right? But then Tony Stark, he says, I'm gonna set my suit to purge the area. A widespread repulsor array at maximum power. It should clear the area and let us make our way to cover. Hopefully regroup and figure out what to do next. And so he says, stay close to me and stay clear of the blast, right? Because at this moment right now, it's just Miles and Iron Man, right? They're like the only ones here. But then suddenly in the midst of this, Miles' spider sense goes off and he realizes there's a Xenomorph that's snuck up behind him. Now, this takes place before the birth of the red one, right? So it's just regular Xenomorphs, and it kills Iron Man. So yeah, this is how Iron Man died in the third video that we covered, right? And so Miles just gets out of there as fast as he possibly can. It gets him clear of the blast, and then he returns back to Iron Man. And Iron Man tells him, look, man, I've got onboard diagnostics. You don't need to tell me. I know how bad it is. And he says, I'm not going to make it. Do you know what you need to do? And Miles is like, what are you talking about? And Iron Man says, I wasn't talking to you. Do you know? And the symbiote says yes, because in case you guys forgot, Miles has the Venom symbiote, right? Miles has had it this entire time. And so what ends up happening is that when the red Xenomorph teleported behind T'Challa and all of them, Venom appears alongside Miles. And so Miles is like, we saw that there was a ruckus going on. It looks like we were almost too late. And the response of Black Panther, no, you are too late, right? They're on us. And he says, it's the big one that's the problem. Nothing that we've done could stop it. It's carrying mutant genes and cutting right through us. And that's where Venom's like, the red one? I'll see what I can do. And so Venom attacks this thing. And this is so dope because it's Venom as a Xenomorph attacking a Xenomorph queen. It's so amazing. Now, initially this thing teleports behind Venom and tries to punch a hole through it. But as you guys know, Venom is a symbiote, right? It's a liquid organism. So you can't just easily destroy it. So when the Xenomorph punches its hand through Venom, that Venom almost looks like it's lost, right? You kind of see blood go everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And then in turn, when the queen thinks it's won, that Venom starts to reconstitute itself. And then it takes over the queen's symbiote literally inside and out. It goes through its body and explodes outward, killing this thing, right? Just literally obliterating it on the spot. And what's probably one of the dopest scenes I've ever seen. I'm sorry, I'm so excited, people. It is an exciting story, man. It's such an exciting story. Like, I love the way this ends. And so, like, Miles is watching this. Emma Frost, who survived, of course, is watching this. Her diamond form is impervious, right? Black Panther's here, and it's like, so now what, right? And at that point, you pick up a month later, and Black Panther just says, all our dreams have ended. We are awake, and all we have left is a barren, broken universe where no new thing can grow. This was their doing. Gods who we regretted what they had made and thought they could erase us, simply because they frowned on their creation. And somehow worse than that, man's creation, whose hate has driven them mad, full with unholy purpose. And now we find ourselves here, hovering right over a black hole, right where the whole thing started. And so Wolverine's like, I mean, it's a sad story, no doubt, but like, that does not answer the question. And the response of Black Panther, perhaps the point is best left for others to make. And so he activates the helmet of Iron Man. And Tony Stark says, I am Tony Stark, and these are my final words. As I record this, I am dying, but also have death growing inside me. It's strange because I've been obsessed for so long with plans of survival that I never allowed myself to think about my end. And facing it now, if I'm being honest, there is some relief in knowing that I denied death's embrace for this long. I spent my life building things, making things, creating. I suppose in a way, that makes me the antithesis of what we face. Some vile thing that lives to infect, consume, and destroy everything we are and everything we have made. All that humankind seeks to leave behind, made ash in the mouth of an alien parasite. I have died fighting that. And instead of surrendering to hopelessness and defeat, I hope that you will too. Seek it out, stand against it. In other times, in other universes. Avenge all our fallen brothers and sisters. Avenge all our fallen worlds. And if you don't mind too much, avenge me. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Massive cliffhanger! Massive cliffhanger, I know. We never find out what happens to everybody on Earth, anybody who remains. It's a huge cliffhanger. Jonathan Hickman, if you see this video, please, for the love of God, make a part 2. Like, make a sequel to this. Anyway, with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Let me know what you think down in the comment section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.